What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to talk about how I use random groupings in my math classroom. This is my new space. I hope you love it. I recently spent some time and rearranged all the furniture and redecorated. I got these new lamps at Chattachuk Market. Shout out to my friend Caroline who introduced me to this place. It's wonderful. I bought 2 lamps and they're just gorgeous. Look at them. Look at it. Anyways, I digress. So for those of you that are new here, welcome. My name is April. I teach math to high schoolers, and even though I look like I might be a high schooler, I've been teaching math for 8 years. I'm a Canadian expat working in Thailand, and now let's just jump right in to the content of today's video, which is visibly random groups. So in my math classroom, I do not have a seating plan, and the students have a different seat every day. So first, let's talk about the why. Why do I do visibly random groupings, and why do I change up the seating every day? I first want to talk about my history as a student with seating plans. And this dates back to my university days when I was studying concurrent education. We had this course called How to Teach Biology or something to that effect. And our instructor arranged the desks in groups of 4. So every single class, she would stand at the door and have some slips of paper for us to pick out of a bowl. And sometimes on these slips of paper were stickers, sometimes they were vocabulary words. It could be a puzzle piece. Whatever you got, you had to try and match that to the correct definition or term or symbol that was on a big table group. And that's how you found your group mates for the day. And what I really loved about that method was that I got to meet different people every day who was also on the same journey as me. They were also studying to become a teacher, and they wanted to become competent teachers in science because that was how to teach science to high schoolers. So that's one of the reasons why I implement visibly random groupings in my classroom. But I also remember other classes where we've just been seated individually in rows and columns, and you don't really get much interaction. I've had math classes like that before. And there's some comfort in that as well, because math can be a very individual sport. I would call it a sport. And so you have your space and your time to focus, and there's not much socializing. It's all about the content. It's all about the lesson. And I think that works too. I mean, I thrived in that environment, but I didn't hardly get to talk to any of my peers or engage in mathematical discussion because I value having that engagement and being able to turn to someone and say, hey, what did you get on this question? Did you get the same thing? Can you explain to me how you did that? That to me is really valuable. So that's why I do random groupings in my classroom. And that's why I vary the seats every day. So that's a little bit behind the why of why I choose to use visibly random groupings and change my seats every day. There's also been hype about building thinking classrooms, and Peter Liljedahl is kind of the main person who's been attributed to the research behind why visibly random groupings work. And some of the things that he writes about in his book, Building Thinking Classrooms, is that it invites a willingness to collaborate with people and not just students that are already friends. It eliminates social barriers and reduces social stress. So when students already have a place to be, then they are not given a choice to self-select. And so everyone is treated equally in that way. There's also increased knowledge and mobility. So the flow of knowledge in the classroom, because you're seated in different groups every day, you get to interact with different people. And so we really get this big exchange of knowledge and information. And the last reason that he mentions is an increased enthusiasm for mathematics learning. I'm not really sure how you would measure that objectively, but in my personal experience, using visibly random groupings for many years now, I would definitely say this is something that I would keep in the math classroom. And I love it so much that I have tweaked the way that I do random groupings over the years. And so I'm going to share with you the different ways that you can get started if you're interested in visibly random groups. Now let's talk about how to get started with random groupings if this is something that you've never done before. So the easiest and most straightforward way is just to arrange your tables into groups. I personally prefer groups of 3 because I find that groups of 2 are too small. My groups of 4 are too big. So 3 is kind of that magic number for my classroom to make that engagement happen. And don't forget that during a lesson, you can also manufacture moments like think, pair, share, where you are increasing the likelihood that students are actually engaging in mathematical discourse with each other. So that's the first thing. Arrange your seats, arrange your classroom into groups of 3 or 4 or whatever number you choose. And then the next thing is just to write a number on the seats. You can print out a paper and put it down, plaster that down. Focus. Is that better? Still not in focus. Now? What about now? What about now? Now. Oh my God. Okay. So here's how I do my random groupings. I get a pack of playing cards. And this is a fun set that I purchased from Taiwan on a trip earlier this year. It's Bruce Lee. Oh, yeah, fun. And what I do is I get them laminated, because what happens over time is that the students will play with the cards. They like to bend them. They like to just like flick them around the classroom. And so they kind of get really ratty. And this is my way of protecting them. Another thing that you can do is cycle through the numbers that you use, right? So you don't always have to use the same numbers every time. You can cycle through so that they don't get all destroyed and bent and ripped up. So lamination is my number one tip. So at the beginning of every class, I will meet my students near the front of the classroom or by the door, and I'll ask them to choose one of the following playing cards. And then what they do is they look at their number and find the table that matches their number. Okay, so level 1 is if you just give them the answer and you say, oh, this is card 6, find table 6. Here's what I like to do, starting from day 1 of class. So I went back into my archives and I dug up the master cards that I used for my groups. So I designed a set of questions based on an activity called the 4 fours. So for example, this card here, 4 plus 4 is 8, plus 4 minus 4 is still 8. So this matches card 8. This is table 8. And this card here, okay, square root of 4 is 2, plus square root of 4 is another 2. So together that's 4. This is 0. So this is table 4. So what students would do is once they get their card number, they go ahead and find the question that actually matches their card. Okay, so this tells them which table to sit at. And I know, okay, can be a little bit anxiety inducing, but first day, keep it simple, right? Use basic orders of operation. You can make the questions even easier than this. It can be like, what's 2 plus 2? Or what's 3 times 5? Do something easy. The only thing about using playing cards, though, is that you can only have a set number of answers from 1 through 13. And depending on the unit, I like to vary my questions. So for the exponents unit, I gave students questions like this. Yep. Or something like this. Here are some more exponent questions. Another thing that I really like about this strategy is not only does it get students thinking and doing math right away from the moment they walk into my classroom, it also helps reinforce some really basic ideas that I need them to understand for the entire unit. So another example is our logarithms unit. Students need to be able to evaluate basic logs, and I need them to be familiar with it. So just the exposure of seeing it, the base, the argument, how the expression is written, that increases the chances that they're going to remember that information better. And then the other thing is that students can also help each other out, right? So if a student does have really high anxiety about math, they might know ahead of time to come in the class a little bit later, pick up their card a little bit later, and instead of looking at the question, they can look for other people who have already found that table and say, hey, is this table 3? And then what you can do is just check. So you can check the card number and see, oh, does it actually match the question or the expression that's at this table? So those are some ways that I like to do random groupings, just because it really helps students reinforce all the information that's being learned. Another thing that I do is because I teach different courses. So if that's you, if you're teaching, for example, maybe a 10th grade class and then a math elective like I do, then not every student is going to be learning logarithms at the same time. Not every student is going to be learning exponents at the same time. So the way that I make my cards will be a little different. I experimented a lot with how I actually designed these master cards that I put at the tables. At the beginning of the year, what I did was I took a full A4 sheet of paper, cut it in half, and then folded that in half again, put a binder clip under it, put some sticky tack under, and kind of just stuck it on the table so it would sit up like this. It was super visible. And you'll notice that if I'm not lazy, I'll have two slight variations on the same table to just get students familiar with the different math notation and language that you might see. So that was my first variation. But you need binder clips and you need sticky tack, and it kind of gets messy. So I've experimented and I found another strategy that I really, really love. And I make these just from A4 paper. Super simple. So I take recycled paper. Okay. I fold it in half like this. And then I open it up again and I fold it into quarters. I should probably show this another way. So I fold it in quarters like that. Then I go to these long edges and fold in, okay, about 2 centimeters, maybe 2.5 centimeters on either end. Then what you're going to do is kind of make a little tent with your paper, with your A4 paper, just like this. Make a little tent. And because these edges are folded, you can slip one edge into the next. So I'm just slipping this piece of paper in here, just like this. So it's secure. Okay, push that in. This is what it looks like from the side. So you've got a little name tent, little name plate like that. Okay, also good for at the beginning of the year when you're trying to learn all your students' names. So I make something like this and I write the question for one of my classes on one side, maybe with one color pen or marker. And then I write another question for my other class on the other side. And I just flip it when I have different classes. And I make both of those correspond to the same answer so that students can see, oh, hey, it turns out that this log question has the same answer as this percent question. And then they're thinking more math, right? So they're making connections in their own way as well. So that's something else I like to do. And I don't know if anyone else has this problem, but because I work in Thailand and the AC is on all the time, sometimes this is not heavy enough and it blows away or it just like gets knocked off the table. So sometimes I will weight it down with just a binder clip it on, and then just place it on the desk so students can see what desk they need to go to. So that's how I do visibly random groups in my math classroom. So now I'll share a little bit of my process and how I design these. I switch it up about every 4 to 6 weeks. If I get bored of the question, then the students are probably bored of the question. So I like to switch it up. And it used to take me a really long time. When I first started Visibly Random Groupings, I had my students in rows and I made individualized questions for every single kid in the class. And that was exhausting. Now I only need to make one set of 6 questions each time I change it up because I have 6 groups of 3, sometimes more or sometimes less, but typically that's the number that I stick to. And so it takes me about 15 minutes at the beginning of the day. I just come in a little bit early and I decide on my stack of playing cards, which numbers I want, and then I write the question. If the unit is exponents, I'll write an exponent question. If we're doing trig, I'll write a trig question. Percent questions are always good. Questions about multiplication facts are always good. Doesn't matter what level, right? It can range from 4th grade all the way to 12th grade. Students need to know their times tables no matter what. And something to keep in mind is that when you're designing your question, you don't want it to be a super complicated question that's going to take you 5 minutes to solve, because you also want your students to be looking at all the other questions that are in the room and solving them in a short amount of time in order to find their seat. So if your questions are too hard, like you can't solve them and your students can't solve them in less than 30 seconds, then it just eats up too much class time. So make the questions simple. And the other benefit of that is that it gives them a little bit of a self-esteem boost, right? Like, ooh, I just got my first win of the day and math class hasn't even officially started yet. If you found today's content helpful, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends, families, coworkers, colleagues if you think that they'd get some value out of this too. Thank you for watching. If you want some more ideas on seat finders or you just don't want to come up with questions on your own, I have a bunch of examples on my Instagram and on my website. And I'm planning to share some of the seat finders that I've already made that you can just print out, so a printable version on my website. So look out for a link in the description box below. Thanks for watching.